Today, I'm going to take you guys into a conversation I had with a principal at a high school in West Texas. Her name is Reagan Berry. She was incredibly open and candid about how smartphones and school-issued devices are affecting the mental health and physical health of students at her high school. This is part of a new series called Teachers Talk here on Scrolling to Death. I'm aiming to bridge the gap in understanding between parents and school administrators and teachers. So let's jump into my conversation with Principal Berry. So tell me your name and what your experience is working in schools.
Yeah, my name is Reagan Berry. I have worked in public education in Texas since 2008. I taught high school. I spent, 2 years split between a junior high and a high school in another school district, but taught for 11 years and then moved into administration in 2019. What a wonderful year to become an administrator, 2019.
Oh my gosh, I bet.
As an assistant principal and now lead principal of a high school with about a little over 1,500 students. Yeah.
And are smartphones allowed in your school or in your district?
Yes, they are.
Oh.
They are allowed in our school. I think it's been like the frog in boiling water. It started off years ago, and there's still even signs, which are kind of humorous, no cell phone use in the building, that were probably put up 15 years ago. I think that's the nature of it, frog in boiling water, that the intention was never for them to be allowed. But as curriculum became digital, we didn't have the capacity for that. I think I can speak for our school, just slowly they entered the classroom and became an okay thing and became pretty much teacher driven as to what's allowed in their classroom and what's not.
Yeah. And I hear that even when there's a ban, the implementation is usually up to the teacher, which can be cause contentious relationships between the students and the teachers.
Yes.
So as a principal, how much power though do you have? Can you say, no, guys, we're not going to bring smartphones into the classroom anymore?
It would take a school-wide decision, which that's the direction that we're actually moving toward next year. Because at the end of the day, what happens in classrooms, it would take my administrative team going in, and teachers are like anybody else. If they're used to running their classroom that way and they feel confident in running their classroom that way, it would take us coming in there and saying, no, this is how you're going to teach. We're not a one-to-one school district, meaning what one-to-one means is every student has their own device that they take with them from class to class. So we're not one-to-one. And as things have become more digitized, teachers feel like they use the cell phone for that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There was this whole push a few years ago, and other school districts have bring your own device. And so school districts push for students to bring their cell phone to class or bring their laptop to class. But this is my second year as lead principal, and also as a mom, just seeing what the cell phones are doing. I think the cons are starting to really outweigh the pros. And so we're moving to a direction next school year of implementing cell phone free at the high school.
Okay.
Which will be a culture shift for parents, teachers, and students.
Yes. Yeah. So to back up a little, what specific problems are they currently causing in the classrooms, the smartphones?
The ones that are talked about, the inattention, the entitlement to the cell phone, entitlement to their device, it's my mom calling, there's habits that we as parents have created also. And so there's those things that seem minor, but they certainly disrupt the educational environment. But then for us, we see a ton of bullying going on, harassment going on, cheating on, you name it, cheating. And then a term that we've used is organized deception. And so texting each other to come up with whatever story or to meet in the bathroom. And that's where we see the vape deals go on, the drug deals go on. We don't have a ton of fighting at our school, but we usually can mitigate it because it's planned. And so we have, people will let us know and we can catch it before it happens. But there's lots of organization of making bad choices on the cell phones as well. We deal with sexting quite a bit. But also we've had students, we have an SRO on our campus, which is a school resource officer. So he's part of our local police force, but he's assigned to us, and he's dealt with sextortion, help students get out of some of those situations if they actually bring it to us or to him.
Right.
Yeah.
When it comes to the sexting, is that happening in like text messages? Do you know, or is it on Snapchat, or where are you seeing that if there's a specific platform?
Snapchat is a huge problem. I mean, there's thousands of snaps. We have some fake accounts that we can watch what's going on too. And I mean, it's just going on constantly throughout the day, interrupting learning constantly. But a lot of the sexting is happening on Snapchat, text messages, some also, but mostly Snapchat.
Okay. So as the principal and as the administration, you've had to set up fake Snapchat accounts in order to keep an eye so you can try to catch some of these bad behaviors in the school.
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And then to touch on the drug comment, are those deals happening on Snapchat?
Yeah, I think they happen on Snapchat. Just which bathroom to meet in, where to meet. We become aware whenever someone comes on camp, like in the parking lot, not actually within our campus at all, through that also. I mean, they'll Snapchat. I've got in their own lingo, you know.
Yeah.
I've got this, and then hit me up if you want it.
And they'll be in the parking lot.
Sometimes. And then sometimes if they're within the school building, they'll meet in the bathroom.
Okay.
And we have detectors. I mean, we've got vape sensors, we've got vape detectors. Like, we have all the things, you know, to try and mitigate that.
Are you familiar with Snap Maps?
From you.
Okay.
Yes. And that it shows their locations.
Yeah. So I've heard at schools from a DEA agent told me this. The dealer at the school will they're all sharing their location with each other on Snapchat through Snap Maps, and the dealer will just throw up his little drug menu. It's just an image, and then kids can see what the menu is and then find the drug dealer's actual location, like down to the like GPS location, and do the deal. So Snapchat is one of the platforms where some of this bad behavior is happening. Another question about the drug stuff. So are you noticing mostly vapes or pills or both?
Both.
Okay.
Both. We've had, not on campus, we haven't had fentanyl on campus, but we're aware of students that have been involved in fentanyl. We've had some proactive meetings with parents that we believe are involved in that. We have confiscated other types of pills that have been sold or traded. And then vapes, THC vapes, nicotine vapes are also around.
Okay. It's great you're doing education around that, because you've seen, I'm sure, such a movement to these fake pills. The kids think that they're Xanax or Oxy or something, but they never have any active ingredient in it. And often there's fentanyl in it because it's so cheap and it's so addictive. And then now children are dying from fentanyl-laced vapes. So if you're not buying them from like a dispensary that has testing, you're buying them from a kid, like a lot of these kids are, it can have fentanyl in it too. So it's just scary. And so if kids were not allowed to have the smartphones during the school day, would that like quell a lot of the cyberbullying, drug issues, all that stuff that you mentioned?
I think so. You know, I've talked to other school districts that have moved towards the cell phone free, and they say it's a hard battle, but it's worth it. They see immediate positive effects, even just in a semester, with grade improvement, attendance improvement, less fights, the discipline referrals go down quite a bit. Yeah, I think it just becomes during the day, if they don't have it for 7 or 8 hours, you're removing a really bad playground where I think people go just to play and create drama. And I think that's how students are too. They kind of rally each other up, and then they see each other around, and it just fans the flame of that.
Yeah, one teacher said something like they're using it like a toy, not a tool. So,
Absolutely.
And so despite teachers' good intentions of get your phone out to look up this thing for your class, all those addictive platforms that are surrounding that thing they're supposed to be doing are drawing them away and pulling their focus away. So they're in a losing battle when they're able
Yes.
to access it. So how does implementation look for next year for banning the phones? Are you taking them at the front office, or what's it going to be? Because that's 1,500 students.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something that I'm still kind of researching and looking into. You know, at first I thought we just do phones and backpacks at the front, and then teachers have to put them at the front of the room. And I've contacted Yonder, the Yonder pouches, and talked to them. And then he gave me some references to call some other schools. And I asked them, could you have done this without the pouches? And they say, absolutely not, because it puts it back on the teachers.
Yes.
And I did a teacher survey a few weeks ago just on cell phones and was somewhat astonished by their answers too, and how some of them view the cell phones. And so even if you have 5 or 6, we have about a little over 100 teachers here. And so even if you have 5 or 6 that aren't on board with the policy, that can ruin the whole bit. That makes it hard on everybody. And so what the pouches do is it really takes it off of their plate, and that's what teachers didn't get into teaching, to regulate cell phones.
Right. Right.
And so I think that's the direction that we're moving. It comes with a financial cost, but I really think that it's worth it. It's my belief that it'll be worth it, and the research supports that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Not letting them access them at all, because if you have them, they have to stay in the lockers or the backpack. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
So the teachers that do utilize them in the classroom, I guess it'll be a transition for them, and you may have to supplement with some more of those one-on-one. Do you think you'll go one-on-one devices then to have access?
That was an interesting question that I asked one of the other principals. I asked him, are y'all one-to-one? And he said, yes, but I'm thinking about going to a cart model, which that's how we are. We have a cart model where we have carts in the classroom. So they get them at the beginning of the class. They put them up. If they don't need them that day, then they don't access them. And he was thinking about going backwards to a cart model. Backwards isn't the right term, probably, but like a negative thing.
Yeah.
Just because they soon take ownership of that, just like they did the cell phone students do. And so we'll probably maintain our cart model that we have here.
I've heard of multiple schools, teachers sharing that they wish it was cart model versus one-to-one.
Yeah.
Even like people that are in charge of replacing devices and that kind of thing, there's so much damage that happens. So your kids at your school don't bring them home?
No.
Oh, I love that. Okay.
No. I nearly said no ma'am to you. So you ma'am, I'm sorry.
It's okay. It wouldn't be the first time I've been called ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Okay. Wow. I'm really excited for you guys. I think this is going to be super positive. Have you announced this update for next year to parents yet?
No. I first talked to our upper administration and just said, this is a hill I'm willing to die on, because they have just become such a problem here. And asked, I hope you can support me. I would love to see local board policy in place for us. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. But my game plan is to start with we have a campus improvement plan committee, which consists of parents and teachers, different, basically like a site-based committee.
Yeah.
So my first meeting with them is actually tomorrow.
Okay. Yes.
To introduce this to them, and then to start laying all the groundwork. And that was suggested, start in the spring, laying the groundwork. I think we'll have some parent engagement meetings about it, where they can ask questions and see how it works, because parents are most concerned with safety. And they feel like if they don't have access, then their kids can't be safe. But I don't know how old your kids are. My oldest is in 4th grade. And what thought keeps crossing my mind is my 4th grader has to be more prepared and more responsible than any of my high school students do. Because if he forgets his lunch, he doesn't get to text me and tell me I forgot my lunch. And he just has to eat a tray from the cafeteria. If he forgets to get his folder signed, he doesn't get to text me. If someone says something to him that upsets him, he has to cope with that. And use coping skills that he's developed, to cope with it. And if something catastrophic, God forbid, happens at his school, I'm trusting the adults that are in charge of him to keep him safe.
Right.
And that goes with all my children. He just happens to be the oldest one. And I don't know how we got to a place where as our kids got older, they became more dependent.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what I see is our high school kids are more dependent on their parents than our elementary age students are.
Yeah, well, we're digitally pacifying them through
Yeah.
the phones all day long. So it will be a transition. And I think it might be helpful if you put it back to them. How does the phone actually keep them safe when it comes to emergency situations? And maybe bring in your safety officer.
Sure.
And explain to them in a school shooting situation, for example, when everyone is supposed to be under their desks or wherever, dark, quiet, and you have phones going off. What do teenagers do? They want to videotape. So you're talking about literally a shooter walking into a classroom and someone holding their lit up phone up. Like that shooter is going to shoot at that phone.
Right.
So it legitimately, and we don't need 100 kids calling 911 or calling their parents, the parents calling the school, tying up phone lines. Like when you actually walk through that scenario, the phones make them more unsafe. So hopefully parents can understand that. Obviously, if that life and death situation were to present itself, we all want to talk to our children and help them. But we have to quell that feeling. I'm very interested in how this experience is for you, introducing it to the parents.
Yeah.
God, the research is there. The research is there as far as giving them space, an independent space during the day, and then saving those small conversations that aren't urgent for the end of the day when you're eating dinner together or in the car together, and allowing them to feel some discomfort in the daytime.
Right.
And be okay with kind of pacifying themselves.
Yes.
So there's a good interview I did with two teachers that they wrote a book called Screen Schooled. It's a few years old, but it's my favorite book in the space. And I interviewed them. That's coming out Thursday. So hopefully you can listen to that and even recommend that book for sure. What about watches? So a lot of kids have Apple Watches in addition to their iPhone, and they're doing a lot of that texting. So say the teacher says, put your phone away. They're doing a lot of that communication on their watches. So will that be included in your ban next year?
That's something that we haven't addressed because the social media is such an issue, and they don't have quite the access to social media on their watch. True. I would be interested to talk to these other schools that went phone free. Earbuds come up a lot, and what will we do about earbuds? Watches, we haven't really talked about watches.
Okay. Because they can still text.
They can still
on
text.
Watches, right? Okay. They can listen to music in their headphones.
Right.
They a lot of them have front-facing cameras, so they can still do selfies. And I don't know. I wouldn't 100% say they can't access some social media on there. I don't know for sure.
I think they can still get the notifications and stuff, so I can see how that would be a huge distraction. People at Yonder have a rollout. They help schools roll out the entire program. And so I was talking to, one of the other principals that used it. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a process the phone goes on airplane mode, and there's all sorts of checks in place to where that happens. As far as the earbuds go, we wouldn't allow that just because we know what all can go on with the earbuds. And they love to claim, and even teachers, that's what this teacher survey was so interesting because they all agree that cell phones are a problem, but then they'll say, but I like for them to have them because they listen to music and it keeps them quiet. But there's so much research that, that takes that away. That makes that not true. Yes, it keeps them quiet, but it's keeping them quiet. They're not doing their work,
Yeah, and they're distracted. And my interview last week was with a doctor here in California, and she studies attention spans, and she talks about multitasking.
Yeah.
And so listening to music, especially if it has lyrics, is going to cause you to do anything else worse, have more errors, it'll take you longer. And actually doing two things at once spikes your stress levels. So, it may just seem like music, but it just takes them away that much more. And they already have trouble focusing. Interesting though. And the teachers, I don't want to call out any teachers, but some teachers have expressed that even the teachers are spending too much time on their phones during the class periods. So will there be any kind of reminder to the teachers on phone use as well?
Sure. No, that's what I'm saying. It'll be a culture shock. It will be a shift. It'll have to be a mind shift. I even think about us as administrators, whenever we're out on lunch duty, that's how people access you now. is through your cell phone, and we usually have office time, and so it's a little more free, when the cell phone, but there will have to be an adjustment on all parts because we're the ones that will set the example.
Yeah.
So I've thought about, should we all get dumb phones, as they call them,
Yeah.
so that it is just call and text.
Right. Did you see that a school did that in maybe New Jersey, was it? They got, it's a small private school,
Sure.
but they got every student and every teacher and administrator a light phone. And that was all that was allowed on campus.
Wow.
And they loved, it sucked for a little bit, but they ended up really loving it.
Yeah. Well, we did a parent engagement thing in February where we just brought in different community resources to share with parents, like, this is what we're seeing at school. And it didn't necessarily involve smartphones, but smartphones were at the basis of all of it, because there was one on dating relationships and dating violence. There was a session on fentanyl. There's a session on social media. And there were just a bunch of sessions like that. But then we had a student panel session. And that was probably the most impactful to parents. And if you sat in that and listened, all the students said, we wish we had more parameters on our phone.
Wow.
Like, we wish somebody would, and they would basically say, we don't, like, it sounds lame to say we don't have control, but yeah, I wish my parents would take my phone at this time, or I wish this would happen. They see the negative effects of it. They see, as they're scrolling through Snapchat during the day, just like adults, do you start comparing yourself? Oh, look what reward they got, or look what lunch they got, or whatever it may be. It's doing nothing positive for them. So
yeah. And they know, like, they're smart. They understand that it's just too addictive to actually make the change. But maybe removing it from the school day will have like a ripple effect into the home, in that the kids will be happier, like their mental health will be better. Like, if they'll feel better over time, and maybe they'll start to make safer decisions at home. And even the parents might be on board with, shutting it down at a certain time.
Sure.
Do any of the teachers use social media to communicate with the students, or any of the coaches or anything?
Social media? I hope not. I don't think so.
Okay. I hear that quite a bit, because they're like, I got to be where they're at. They don't check their email. So I set up an Instagram where I send out things.
So we have student groups that have Instagram accounts just to share, like, what's going on in their group. We have a high school Instagram account and Facebook account just to brag on students and what's going on at the school. As far as their main line of communication, no. I think they use GroupMe.
Okay.
Or Remind for their main line of communication. We use Google Classroom, and so I know that a lot of teachers use Google Classroom to communicate too.
Okay.
And then we have school email also.
Good. Okay, cool. Is your district, I'm assuming not, one of the ones that's suing social media, big tech, for like the increase in expenses? Okay. There's like 200 plus school districts in the US, and a lot in Canada too, because of the increase in expenses they have in mental health support and everything.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that all the issues go away without smartphones, but right now, for this generation and for the students that we're serving, most of the issues can be tied back to a smartphone.
Yeah. And hopefully everybody's working on this federal legislation to try to keep kids safer online, but nothing has passed yet since the 90s federally. So there's no regulation on what they're doing as far as from the governmental side on these social media platforms. So we have to be more stringent in the schools and the homes right now. And then hopefully in the coming years, we'll have some more support legislatively and won't have to be so stringent. But anything that you would request of parents when it comes to kids and smartphones? So if you were to be in front of all the parents, like, what's something you'd want them to know about how their smartphones are affecting them at school?
I think one thing that I want parents to know, just because I have friends with high school age kids, and whenever I talk about this, they're of course very pro, yes, get rid of the smartphones, but then they'll say, but I don't think that my kids see that. I don't think, and it's not that they think their kids are so great. They just will say, that stuff doesn't come across their feed. And one of the things that I talked about at our last parent engagement night was the access. Like, everything is so accessible to them. So even if they didn't intend on seeing that, it's so accessible, and the algorithms just will feed it. if there's a lingering just a little bit too long.
Mm-hmm.
And even if your children aren't involved, they're great kids and aren't involved in some of these terrible things. I think, and you brought it up, was okay, well, then young girls are constantly getting diets crammed down,
Mm-hmm.
having to see diets, having to look a certain way. And I think that affects us as adults, but teenagers and kids more than we realize. I mean, it all has to be pretty anecdotal. Like, why do you feel that way about yourself? They'd really have to dive into. But I would want parents to know that just because your child isn't sextorted, there's other terrible things going on with social media.
Yeah.
And at school, if I can provide an environment, even if they're mad about it in the beginning, to where they're not getting fed negative thoughts, they're not getting fed temptations, they're not getting fed that, then as a principal and even as a mom, I want to do that.
Yeah. I wish you were our principal.
Oh, well, thank you. I really just, and I'll be honest with you, when I was in the classroom, cell phones were around, and I taught actually in a computer lab because I taught business classes. So we were on Excel. Like, we had desktop computers when I was teaching.
Yeah.
And I had a little bit of the mentality. I had the mentality of natural consequences. Like, okay, well, you want to be on your cell phone and not do the work, then the natural consequences, you're going to get a 0 for this assignment. But now the natural consequences are too costly.
Yeah.
I mean, it has just become way too costly. And I think some of it has to do with I'm a mom with kids that are entering into these things. And so you learn, you get wiser as you get older, but the consequences are just too grave.
Yeah. There's so much at stake, and the things that they're accessing, like you mentioned, it doesn't have to be, it can be, but it doesn't have to be buying drugs or getting sextorted, that kind of thing. It's just that mental health challenges, especially for teenage girls. It's like almost 60%. So most teenage girls are feeling sad and hopeless persistently. And it's like 30% of teenage girls consider suicide. So it's really, and these are linked to social media use, especially excessive social media use. So if we take it out of their time during school, that cuts back so many hours that they're adding on, and we're going to see mental health improvements if we take it out of the classrooms. So I'm just really excited you're taking that step next year. And I think any struggles, like, you can just feel really good about yourself. Like, any of these struggles that are going to happen in conflict, like, it's for the greater good and the mental health and physical health of the kids.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about school issued devices now. So you mentioned you don't have one-to-one devices and they don't take them home.
Right.
And I love that.
Yes.
Well, I usually ask if any parents opted out of the school issued device, but since you guys don't bring it home, okay, that's a no. Do you feel like generally in education we're relying too much on the school issued devices for lessons? And do you feel like they're as effective as like hand to paper lessons?
I think that the pendulum has swung, to where, yes, we're starting to rely on them too much.
Yeah.
Even, it's easy to just say, if, let's say, for example, a teacher's not going to be there or a student is absent, rather than the student coming in and getting their makeup work or having a conversation with the teacher says, well, it's on Google Classroom.
Yeah.
I mean, you're losing so much relationship, not just because you're behind the screen, but even that verbal instruction and giving verbal instructions, because you can walk into a classroom and it will just say assignments on Google Classroom and everything's right there. And I think some of that COVID kind of trained everyone. I mean, it threw us into that world.
Yes.
To where that became acceptable and so accessible. But yes, I do think there's an overuse. I think sometimes schools' hands are tied with, that's where curriculum is. It's all digital now. Yeah. And so that even math curriculum is digital, which for me, I need to do numbers with a pencil and a sheet of paper.
Yeah, they should
learn that.
And that
makes it really difficult. Our state testing has all gone digital. And I know that that's hard for some students.
How have the test scores looked? Any trends up or down in the last 10 years?
Well, last year was the first year for Texas to go completely digital. Some schools had been. We were still using paper just because we weren't a one-to-one school district. So that kind of threw us into digital. But they also did, a complete redesign of our test where it was more written, not so many multiple choice questions. And so the comparative data it's hard to see like where
Sure.
the variables are because
Yeah.
they change the entire test. But my third graders having to learn how to type, to write written paragraphs because it's all digital now.
Oh.
So that has changed in the elementary, and I can't speak a ton to elementary except for with my own children and whenever we sit in administrator meetings with the elementary principals.
Mm-hmm.
But that's been a game changer that you now have Chromebooks in, second grade teaching them how to type when they're still learning how to write.
Right. Okay. Yep. So mine are in second, first, and then a preschooler. But they get those iPads in kindergarten, and I've expressed I don't want them using it as much as possible, just like only when needed, but it's just a lack of control. So a lot of teachers, when it comes to the typing versus the handwriting, a lot of teachers are sharing like 12th graders handwriting is illegible, like a first grader's handwriting.
Yes. And I mean, this has been around since texting, but the grammar is atrocious as well.
Right. Yeah. It's not the kids' fault, right? Like they just kind of fell into this time of our society where we thought, let's get everything online. They're going to learn so much. They're going to be the next amazing generation of technologists and all this stuff. And the harms of it are proving to outweigh the benefits. And we've hopefully switching things around. But when it comes to the school issued devices, how often do you have insight into this? How often are they doing something they're not supposed to be doing on the school issued device?
Often.
Okay.
That's what I would say. We have pretty good filters as far as what they can access and not access. They can, they can't get on any social media. They can't listen to Spotify. YouTube they can get on YouTube, but it's pretty restricted. Mm-hmm. It could be more restricted,
Yeah.
And then all of our teachers have a program where they can monitor what is going on on the Chromebooks as well. Mm-hmm. But they'll still get on and play, they think, math games is harmless. And yeah, it's harmless, but it's still just
distracting you.
Yes.
Yeah. And all that gamified learning stuff has not proven to be effective.
Right.
So, okay. So we're relying on them a little bit too much. They're accessing inappropriate things on there at times, but you do have the cart system. They're not taking them home. So I feel like generally on the spectrum of what I'm hearing, like that's a much better situation than a lot of.
Yeah. And we use Bark system. We have a subscription to Bark. And so
you do.
Yeah. So if they, search anything, we have some filters and criteria. If they search anything, we get an email, whether it's, and it categorizes it like this is urgent. And we can dig into their search history, call them in, talk to them. And they're usually called. I mean, in fact, last week I had a student in here that said, well, I should be able to send a private email. I said, not on a school issue device. You don't get to send a private email.
That's where grooming and all kinds of stuff can happen.
Yes.
And cyberbullying, even on email, because whatever they can access,
Yes. And we've had students just, so people know, they'll share a Google Doc and they'll message back and forth on the Google Doc. If they can't message or if they have their phones taken away. And fortunately, we, anything that hits the Bark system, it gets flagged and we can see it and put a stop to that or call them in or talk to parents.
Did Bark do a deal with your district or just your school?
It's our district.
Great. Do any kids have Bark phones?
Oh, I don't know. My own fourth grader has a Gab phone, or not a phone. He has a Gab watch. I don't know if any students have a Gab or a Bark phone.
Or Bark, yeah.
And then, Bark also gives some tools to parents because we have a district contract with them. And I don't know how many have taken advantage of that either.
Okay.
Yeah.
I literally had a call with the internet service provider company that helps bring Bark to schools. And they said that, yes, it usually is offered to parents, but not a lot of parents opt in for it. Generally, like, what does your perfect world look like when it comes to your students and technology?
My perfect world would be that they don't have access to their cell phones. And when teachers are teaching bell to bell, engaging bell to bell, even, one of the teachers that I talked to, that she has a really strict phone policy in her classroom. And so there aren't cell phones in her classroom. She said when students finish their work, she said, I have games and they can go and get a board game, and they,
Yeah, I love that.
or I have crossword puzzle books or Sudoku books that they can go and get. And she said, and they've all become accustomed to that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really great. But I think teachers will see engagement go up. I think it will challenge our teachers in ways that it hasn't before, just because cell phones can become babysitters, but some of them have just surrendered. Like, this is just the way it is, and that's not what it has to be.
Yeah.
So I think it will make a more joyful campus, a more, positive culture around campus, and that's what I want to see, just students engaging with each other, talking to each other, lifting each other up, teachers having relational conversations with students also, and just building those interactions that make them more productive after high school, which that's the goal.
Yeah.
To make them good humans that are productive in society.
Yeah, because you can't have your phone with you at your job typically or be looking at it all the time. Like, you have to stay focused, whatever you're going to do next,
Right.
college, whatever it is. It's going to be so exciting to see like the lunchtime where everyone just talking and it be real loud again. I don't know. Do you have that issue now where everyone at lunchtime is sort of on their phones or like talking about something on their phones?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. We even have kids that they bring little controllers and they can hook them up to their phones, and then they're all playing a video game, and at least they're doing something together, but still it's not conversations.
No, one small step better. But
yeah.
Okay, so if I asked you generally, does tech belong in schools?
I think there's a place for it. There has to be a place for it, just because it is a part of our world now. When we were in school, tech was calculators.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's certainly a place for that. So I think there's a place for it. I think everything on the internet isn't bad. Just like, a street isn't necessarily bad. There's a pathway, for a street, but playing in the street is bad.
Right.
And so I think learning how to cross the road, learning is important. Yeah. And I think the research supports that brains aren't fully developed and they can't handle the things that adult brains still struggle with, but should be able to handle. So I do think there's a place for technology. I think it looks very different than what it currently is in schools. And I think it will take society and an entire culture to try and make that shift.
And I see that shift happening. And honestly, a lot of the teachers that don't have bands that I've talked to, it's like next year is when it's being implemented. It's like coming now. And I think they're seeing the legislation and the Surgeon General's warning and the lawsuits, and everybody's seeing these things, been like, we can't like ignore this anymore.
Right.
Okay. Anything else you want to share on this topic?
I just think, everything that you've said is spot on. If they listen to any of your podcasts, it's spot on. The cell phones are an issue. Schools, I think it's a society thing. And so, I was reading Jonathan Haidt's, articles and stuff, and there's the big push for wait until 8. And even, I think it was on a podcast you did talking about that it takes 1 or 2 students to get Snapchat, and then the entire class has Snapchat because that's how they communicate. Yeah. It's really going to take parents banding together and partnering with schools. School, I can lay down the law up here at school and I can hold my ground with parents. But even at home, it's going to take parent groups, friend groups to say, we're not doing this, and to get that culture shift. And so I really hope that as schools move towards this, I hope that there's support from parents. I hope there's trust. I think it's going to take schools, which public schools aren't always the most transparent. And I think that's why there's this tension between the two sometimes. Yeah. But I think schools are going to have to become really transparent. I know that it's going to because parents are used to so much communication from their student, we don't typically notify whenever we're doing some sort of safety drill. But I'm going to have to communicate today. This is the drill that we're having, so that there isn't this sheer panic. It's going to put pressure on me to become a better communicator with my parents because that's what they're accustomed to. We can't just go cold turkey. And we're all on the same team. Yeah. Wanting better for our kids, and research supports that the smartphone is not good for our children.
And Reagan, I think parents are seeing more clearly the issues that the smartphone is causing. And I agree. And my whole goal with this whole series of interviews and in my life is to get like parents and schools more on the same page regarding technology use. And really the smartphones is the easy target. Like we have to get them out of the kids' hands during the school day. And so thank you so much for all of your insight and for listening to the podcast. And I'm really glad that it's resonating with you. And can you please keep me updated on how things roll out with your band and with parents? And if you need any resources from me or like clips from interviews to show or something, because especially once I cut together this interview, hearing from dozens of teachers all saying the exact same thing, like I feel like that's going to be an effective way for parents are going to be like, oh crap, like I got to stop contacting them during the daytime or feeling like I need to do that. Like there's going to be sacrifices on both sides, but it's all for the mental health outcomes for our children and our students. So thank you, Reagan.
Of course. Thank you for what you do.